But my next guest says correctional officers need more resources and time to do their job safely. Jason Godin is the national president of the Union of Canadian Correctional Officers, and he joins me by FaceTime from Picton, Ontario. Thanks for joining us, sir. Let's begin with these 7 guards, at least 7 guards in 3 weeks. Why is it happening?
Well, obviously, fentanyl poses a risk to all first responders in the country, and obviously, correctional officers are no exception. It's clearly presenting a massive issue for us behind the walls, and it's certainly presenting issues for other first responders out in the community. But we're really no different than other first responders, and we're subject to exposures like they are as well.
The question, when we say exposed, that's a word that has been used throughout this story since CBC News broke it. But when we say exposed, how were they and in what manner were they exposed to it?
Well, there's many ways a correctional officer can be exposed. I mean, first of all, part of our job is responding to inmates who have overdosed. There's certainly a possibility of being exposed there. At the same time, we're responsible for conducting searches on the property as well as inside the institution. So these are often where the exposures occur. Obviously, it presents a pretty dangerous situation for correctional officers. We continue to look for, certainly ask the department for more tools for safety reasons. At the same time, we're in disagreement about the handling threshold levels, which most law enforcement agencies start taking precautions at 1 gram, and for whatever reason, we're in disagreement here with corrections about lower precautions taking place at 3 grams. We don't see ourselves any different from the other first responders, and we believe that the potency of fentanyl can be found, in our institutions at the same level as it is in the community.
And as we've recently found out, carfentanil can be a single grain that can prove deadly as well, and it's pretty hard to tell under the circumstances of, for example, a search. But when you describe exposure, is this, and I don't want to, actually I do want to get into the nuts and bolts of this, is this like a baggies that are found that is then opened or is ripped open, or how are they actually being exposed? Are they breathing it in? Are they ingesting it? Is it getting on their hands?
Yeah, from what we understand, it's usually ingested or breathed in. I mean, obviously, fentanyl in the size of a salt grain can be deadly or potentially harmful. I mean, we've seen that at Bowden, where we've had officers who were Narcaned for their safety. We've had a couple of, exposures, recently in Edmonton. So, I mean, fentanyl can be ingested, obviously, in many ways. It can go right through your skin as well, and certainly can be an airborne if it's in a powder-like substance. So, it's very, very difficult. Obviously, we're trying to take the precautions that we can. We wear masks, we wear gloves, but at the same time, we're saying that any unknown substance more than a gram, we need to start taking precautions right away. Narcan is now available to correctional officers inside after the union had pushed for this. I believe it was last fall. But again, we continue to see exposures. There's also tools in the field, search tools that we can be using as an example in VNC that we're looking at. It's a real danger. It's a danger for those public safety officers on the street, but it's equally as dangerous for correctional officers inside, who in the course of their duties not only have to respond to overdoses, but at the same time are doing their regular duties such as searching, which can expose them as well inside of a cell or in VNC or those various areas. In fact, recently we had searched a vehicle on the property, and again there was an officer who suffered an exposure. So it is very serious business. We're very concerned about it. We're telling our members to take as many precautions as possible. At the same time, we're pushing on the department to continue to work with us to try to find better solutions, better equipment to deal with the problem.
You mentioned the search. This is the case where if it's on the street, an officer stops someone, it may be a baggie in their pocket or in a shoe or something like that. But in a contained environment, like a prison cell, they can hide it in all kinds of places that, as you say, are difficult to search and can present exposure risk at that point.
Well, this is what we're saying to the department. Look, our risk is really no different than the risk to those public safety officers on the street. When we're searching a cell, it's very difficult to find these items. At the same time, it can be, mailed in, and we have to take precautions in those circumstances as well. So it is very, very difficult. And again, part of our issue is when we're responding to a cell, it could be because an inmate's overdosed. So again, we have to, analyze the situation and try to ensure that we're safe. But again, we have an obligation, of course, to preserve the life of the inmate. So we're in a very delicate and tough balancing situation where we also have to take precautions before we start to administer the first aid needed to the inmate as well. So again, we're much like first responders on the street. For us, we're doing all three jobs behind the walls of a penitentiary, that of the paramedic, the firefighter, and the police officer. So again, it's very complicated for us to manage this situation, and it's difficult. It's a difficult situation. It's a very dangerous one.
We've seen the use of fentanyl. We've seen the overdose deaths from fentanyl multiply exponentially right across the country. Can we expect a similar exponential growth of the use of the drug and presumably the dangers represented behind the walls?
Well, I would say certainly the trend in the community is we're seeing more exposures and more deaths, and I don't think, from our perspective as a union, we don't think that trend is gonna go away inside the prisons. In fact, it'll continue to rise just like it is in the community. So again, we're trying to get out ahead of the game here, and we're saying, look, we have to look at new technologies. We have to tighten up our precautions, our safety precautions, as tight as we possibly can, because obviously the trend in the community, we feel that the trend will continue behind the walls of our federal penitentiaries.